We want to film a little content here just talking about a particular situation where you're cruising and either you're planning ahead before the cruise, doing a good job of thinking at each stop what you're going to do, or you've arrived at a port and you, for whatever reason, you don't have your excursions planned for that day, and you're trying to decide whether to take a train to maybe a major city or a particular attraction that is nearby, or whether to stay in town and, share kind of our thoughts about the process that we go through.
If you are going to Rome, your port is not near Rome. If you're going to Berlin, it's not near, the port is not near Berlin. And if you're going to Paris, the port is not near Paris. Good things to know. Same if you're going to London, the port is not near London.
Right. So really what you have to decide, or one of the considerations you have, is, one, you're going to be in port a limited time. So you're looking at, how many hours you actually have that day. And you have to allow a safety margin on each end, because even though the ship itinerary will tell you, hey, we think we're going to dock at 8 a.m., it probably won't be earlier than 8 a.m., but it could well be later, because things happen. There are delays, there's weather, there's all kinds of things. And you may not be the first group that gets to disembark that day. So you need a buffer on both ends. Certainly you want to get back. You don't want to be running down the pier as the ship's pulling away. So you have to leave a buffer. So you factor that in, and then you decide how long will it take to get to this other city or this destination, how many hours both ways, some fudge factor, for delays in that, and decide, help you decide, hey, do I go for that?
And I think there's some basic rules. If you're trying to go to Berlin, they're gonna list the port as Warnemunde, and that is the port. And they'll say, but you can go to Berlin, but it's a 2-hour train ride. And the ships will have an excursion where they actually either buy the tickets for you or they rent and get a train to go on their schedule. If it's a big enough ship with enough people, then they actually work with the train companies and they have their own train with just cruise passengers.
And to be clear, you can do that yourself. You can still do it yourself, but
you're buying your own tickets.
You're buying your own tickets, making your own arrangements. Mm-hmm. You've got to...
We're going to stay on the Warnemunde example. If you're in Warnemunde, then the train station is literally right off the ship. So super easy to do that by yourself. You just need to check the train schedules and make sure that there's no train strikes going on, which Germany, that's not usually an issue, and that you know when to get back. So it's doable on your own. I think another one to talk about, because I see this one a lot, is Le Havre. Le Havre in France is the port that they use to take you to Paris. Paris, again, it's 2 hours away by train. That is going to make for a long day. And the ships will generally have a long day in port to accommodate all of those people that are going to take trains.
Yeah, I think how you feel about that depends a lot on what kind of traveler you are, mm-hmm. how often you travel, whether that is a destination you expect to go back to. And kind of a good example is Jennifer and I have been to Paris a number of times, and quite often it's just we're going from one part of Europe to another, and our train, if we're traveling by train, happens to go through Paris. And I'll be honest, on some of those, stopping in Paris, where you frequently come into one train station, there's north, south, east, west main stations, you may have to get off your train and by local transportation go to one of the other train stations. It's more of a hassle than anything. And quite often we're honestly, if we're not staying there a couple days, we're just anxious to get in and out of town. So I say that for us, we know we're going back to Paris.
And we've spent significant time in Paris.
Yeah, we don't feel like, if we are there on this cruise, mm-hmm. that I want to spend 2 to 4 hours or more traveling on a train to go to Paris, because I know I'm going to go back there. But last year we were traveling with some good friends, and at least one of them, maybe both, had never been to Paris. Right. They don't know when they're going back.
Right.
And so they went and did it and had a wonderful experience. the most memorable experience maybe of that trip for them. So very much this question will depend on your own experience, your own needs and desires, and that'll help you make that decision. One other thing I would say is, I said a minute ago that you can do this yourself. You can buy tickets online before you get there. You can do it all. But when you're traveling through the ship's train excursion, it's going to be more convenient in a way because they're going to arrange the transportation to and from the train station. You also have their guarantee. They're going to check the names and they're not going to leave without you. If you're doing your own thing, you don't have that guarantee. Now, hopefully you're traveling on the same train they are and you're following, you're being safe, but that is a consideration for you.
If you're interested in the ports, Warnemunde, for example, or Havre, we do have videos about what to do in the ports if you're not wanting to go into the big cities. We've got those videos over on the Cruise Ports channel. So check those out so that if you're feeling like, man, I'm not looking for the 2-hour train ride, well, then go enjoy a day in port. The ports are fabulous. I have to say, Dover is worth seeing. Warnemunde, we love that as a port. We tend to go back there quite frequently. Le Havre, I really enjoy Le Havre, and there's a lot to do around these ports in other small cities that aren't too far away.
Yeah, and one other maybe pro tip or at least tip, if you haven't traveled by train a lot in Europe, the trains are wonderful. They're quite a different experience than traveling by train in the United States. So they typically will have first class, second class areas. Even the second class areas are very nice. Restrooms, restaurants, bars, very comfortable seating, big windows. That is a nice way to travel.
Yeah, and the trains will have plugs and they'll have Wi-Fi. So
Charging,
yeah, you're in good shape there. I was going to say sort of the same. Civitavecchia for Rome. There are things to do in that port, and there's things to do that are. So Rome's about an hour away from Civitavecchia. If you go by train, if you're in a car, it can be a longer drive just because of traffic. But there are things to do in those ports, and so I would say if there's a chance that you're going to be going back to one of these big cities and you're going to be able to spend some time and taking a show and do all of that kind of stuff, do it. And do it that way. If you're coming on a cruise ship and you're there for a day, boy, take advantage of the port towns. And I'm going to give examples of port towns we have fallen in love with.
Yeah.
Yeah? So I really believe that the port for Perth is actually as darling a town as Perth is. Fremantle. I love Fremantle. And I would say the same for the port for Edinburgh is South Queensferry. I love South Queensferry and think it's a darling little town with a whole lot of really interesting history and a lot of views and some super great little shops and cafes.
Yeah, and if you do lease a car for yourself or you hire a driver, it's probably a much better place for them to pick you up for those day trips.
For sure.
Because, Edinburgh is a beautiful city, but getting around heavier traffic, it's just a little more convenient for your driver to pick you up there and then go to some of the local sites that you might want to go see.
And we have found that with some of those cities, it's actually easier to go by train. So for Edinburgh, we went by train. Glasgow, we went by train. We did not try to drive. And even in those times where we're driving and we're not on a cruise ship, we don't drive. We go by train.
Just the parking.
Just the parking.
Yeah, traffic. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for watching this video.
I hope this helps you make some decisions about what you're going to do in those ports that have access to big cities but are in smaller ports.
Appreciate your comments. If you have any feedback or you have some of your own favorite stops and tips to do, please share them. Thank you.
Thank you.